You just got your blood work back. Your LDL is in the target zone, and your doctor says everything looks fine, so you exhale. But here's the plot twist. Across real-world hospital cohorts and registries, plenty of people who show up with heart disease had LDL levels that didn't look alarming on paper. Because your standard panel can miss two things that can change the story. ApoB, which helps estimate how many atherogenic particles you're actually carrying, and LPA, a largely genetic wildcard that can raise risk even when LDL looks okay. In the next few minutes, I'll show you when fine LDL isn't a free pass, who should consider these tests, and how to have a calm, smart conversation with your clinician. Have you ever been told your cholesterol was fine, but you still felt unsure? Maybe you nodded along during the appointment, relieved at first, but then later that nagging feeling crept back in. Something didn't quite add up, especially when you thought about your family history or that one relative who had a heart attack seemingly out of nowhere. Now, quick reset, because I don't want this to land as fear. This is about getting a more complete picture, not hunting for something to worry about. Think of LDL the way you'd think of a headline. It's useful, it's often accurate, but it's not always the full article. And if you're over 40, you've probably felt this tension before. You're trying to do the right things, you're showing up for your checkups, you're reading the lab portal the moment it's available. Maybe you've even switched to oatmeal or started walking more, and still the story doesn't feel fully resolved. There's this quiet uncertainty that lingers. Here's the promise of this video. In plain English, LDL-C can be a helpful marker, but sometimes it's an incomplete one, and two add-on tests, ApoB and LPA, can help explain why someone with OK LDL might still carry more risk than they realize, or why someone with higher LDL might not be as high risk as the number makes it sound. This matters because in the real world, we've seen people with completely normal-looking cholesterol panels end up with cardiovascular events that shocked everyone, including their doctors. And we've also seen people with elevated LDL who, when you dig deeper into the full picture, aren't in the danger zone everyone assumed. Before we go further, an important disclaimer. This is educational content only, not personal medical advice. I'm not your doctor, I'm not diagnosing you, and I'm not prescribing treatment. Every person's health situation is unique, and decisions about testing and treatment should always be made with your licensed healthcare provider who knows your full medical history. My goal here is simpler. Give you a map and the right questions so your next clinician visit is calmer, clearer, and more productive. I want you to walk into that appointment with better questions and a deeper understanding of what these numbers actually mean. So what are we doing today? We're going to walk through 3 scenarios you'll recognize, real-life patterns that show up all the time. First, the LDL looks fine, but something feels off scenario. Second, the LDL is high, but the rest of the picture is complicated scenario. Third, the everything looks normal and then one genetic marker changes the whole conversation scenario. And we'll do it without jargon, without panic, and without the internet's favorite hobby, turning one lab value into a personality test. Here's the big idea you'll hear me repeat. LDL-C measures how much cholesterol is riding around in your bloodstream. ApoB is closer to estimating how many atherogenic particles you're actually carrying. And LPA, a largely genetic wildcard that can raise risk even when LDL looks okay. In the next section, we're going to make that simple and a little uncomfortable in the best way. We'll look at how fine LDL happens and why it sometimes isn't a free pass. If this is already making the picture clearer than what you've heard elsewhere, stick with me because the payoff is practical. We're about to break LDL into cargo versus truck count, and I'll show you the exact situation where your LDL looks reassuring, but the number of particles is quietly doing the opposite. All right, let's cash out that metaphor because it explains a huge amount of the confusion. LDL-C is measuring how much cholesterol is inside LDL particles. Think cargo. ApoB is measuring, in a practical way, the number of atherogenic particles that can get into the artery wall. Think trucks. Here's why that difference matters. Plaque doesn't form because a lab report looks scary. Plaque forms when particles repeatedly interact with the artery wall over time. More trucks on the road means more chances for trucks to bump the guardrail. Some of that cargo gets retained in the artery lining, inflammation follows, and the sticky process of plaque growth can start. That's the simple mechanism. Particles enter, some get retained, the wall reacts, plaque builds. Now, a key detail that makes ApoB so useful. Each atherogenic particle carries one ApoB protein, so ApoB becomes a practical way to estimate particle number. And this is where people get blindsided, because LDL-C and ApoB can disagree. That disagreement has a name: discordance. Discordance is basically the moment your headline and your full article don't match. Let's make it real with a quick, relatable example. Person A and Person B both have the exact same LDL-C number on their standard panel. On paper, they look identical. Let's say both have an LDL of 120 milligrams per deciliter, right in that target zone that makes doctors nod approvingly. But Person A is carrying fewer larger LDL particles, fewer trucks, each with more cargo. Their ApoB might come back at 80 or 90 milligrams per deciliter. Person B is carrying many more smaller particles, more trucks, each with less cargo. Their ApoB might be 120 or even 130 milligrams per deciliter. Same total cargo on the LDL test, very different traffic on the particle count. And if you're wondering, okay, but who ends up being Person B? Often, it's people with patterns like higher triglycerides, especially above 150, insulin resistance or prediabetes, where your body isn't handling glucose efficiently anymore, metabolic syndrome, that cluster of risk factors that tends to show up together, or certain genetic lipid patterns that run in families, not always, but often enough that it matters in a 40-plus population, where metabolism can change even if your habits haven't. Your body at 45 doesn't process fats and sugars the same way it did at 25, even if you feel like you're still doing the same things. Here's a gentle myth bust that saves a lot of frustration. You can't reliably eyeball ApoB from LDL-C. Even good HDL, or a normal total cholesterol number, doesn't guarantee the particle count is where you'd expect. LDL is a helpful headline, but it's not the whole article, especially when triglycerides are elevated, weight has shifted after 40, or blood sugar is trending in the wrong direction. So what should you do with that? Not panic, not self-diagnose, not start optimizing supplements based on a random social media chart. The actionable move is simpler. Recognize when it's reasonable to ask, are my particles matching my cholesterol? Because if your LDL-C is fine, but ApoB is high, that's a different conversation than if both are low. And if your LDL-C is high, but ApoB isn't as high as expected, context matters there too. Your clinician may interpret your overall risk differently, and sometimes that changes the plan, and sometimes it simply changes how confident you feel about the plan. So, in practical terms, ApoB is the test that answers how many atherogenic particles are actually in circulation in a way that can be more revealing when the standard numbers don't line up with the rest of the picture. And now we're ready for the part that surprises most people. ApoB isn't just extra trivia. In many guidelines and expert reviews, it's treated as a particularly useful marker when LDL-C and particle burden don't line up. Which raises a fair question, especially if you've been told you're fine for years. If the particle count can matter so much in certain patterns, why isn't ApoB on every standard panel? So why isn't ApoB already on every standard cholesterol panel? Not because it's fringe. Major cardiology guidance talks about ApoB as a useful add-on, especially when the usual numbers don't match the real-world picture. The bigger reason is more boring. Medicine runs on habits, billing codes, and what's been good enough for most people most of the time. LDL-C is cheap, familiar, and it works well in a lot of situations.
but works well and tells the whole story are not the same thing. Here's the grounded takeaway. ApoB is most valuable when you suspect the trucks and cargo problem, when LDL-C might not be telling you how many particles are actually circulating. And that tends to show up in specific patterns, especially after 40, when insulin resistance and triglycerides can quietly drift even before you have a diagnosis attached to your chart. Now let's add the second missing piece, the one that can make a person's risk feel confusing even when everything else looks tidy: Lp(a).
And here's a quick micro hook before we explain it. If you have a strong family history of early heart disease, this is the one test many experts think is worth checking at least once because it can explain a lot. If ApoB is the truck count, Lpa is like a special kind of truck that you didn't order that shows up because it runs in the family. You didn't choose it, and for most people, you can't meaningfully change it with lifestyle alone, and it was largely programmed into your genes before you were born. Lpa, lipoprotein(a), is a type of LDL-like particle with an extra protein attached called ApoA. In plain language, it's a cholesterol-carrying particle with a unique tag that can make it more atherogenic for some people. And here's why people call it a wildcard. Lpa levels are largely genetic and often relatively stable across adulthood. You measure it once, and that number is likely to be similar years later. That's why many guidelines and expert reviews support measuring it at least once, especially in people with higher or unclear risk. It's a set-it-and-forget-it kind of test, but the information it gives you can be profound. Important nuance: relatively stable doesn't mean identical forever in every scenario, and there's ongoing research about variability over time. But for most people, Lpa behaves more like a baseline trait than a daily lifestyle-driven marker. It's not a "you ate bacon last weekend" number. It's more of a "this is the baseline you were born with" signal. So why does it matter? Because Lpa can raise cardiovascular risk independent of LDL-C, meaning you can have an LDL that looks totally reasonable, maybe even optimal at 70 or 80 milligrams per deciliter, and still have Lpa quietly pushing risk upward. The LDL headline looks calm, but the footnote changes the plot. And this is where people over 40 often feel the emotional whiplash. You did the annual physical, you did the walking, maybe even hit 10,000 steps most days. You cut back on the obvious stuff, the fast food, the daily desserts, the extra cocktails. Your LDL didn't scream for attention. Your doctor said you were doing great. And then you hear about a marker you've never been offered, never even knew existed, one that can help explain why your family history looks the way it does, why your dad had a heart attack at 58, why your aunt needed bypass surgery at 62, why heart disease seems to run in your family even though everyone tried to live healthy. This is the missing piece that suddenly makes the family puzzle fit together. This is also the moment to stay grounded. A high Lpa is not a prophecy. It's not a countdown clock. It's not a guarantee that something bad will happen. It's a risk enhancer, one input that helps a clinician decide how aggressively to manage the modifiable parts of risk. LDL lowering strategy, blood pressure control, because risk factors compound with each other, diabetes prevention and glucose control, smoking status, exercise capacity and fitness, and overall inflammatory context. The good news is that while you may not be able to change your Lpa much, you can absolutely change how you manage everything else around it, and that can make a meaningful difference. Now let's make it practical. Who should consider discussing ApoB and Lpa? Here are the raise your hand if this is you categories, not as a diagnosis, just as a discussion starter. You have a strong family history of heart attack, stroke, or aortic valve disease, especially at younger ages. You've had a cardiovascular event or an imaging finding that felt out of proportion to your standard cholesterol panel. Your triglycerides trend high, your HDL trends low, your waistline changed after 40, or you've been told pre-diabetes or insulin resistance. Your LDL-C is fine, but you have multiple risk factors and you want a clearer picture of particle burden.
Or your LDL-C is high, and you and your clinician are trying to decide how aggressive to be, because context matters. Here's the reflective question I want you to sit with. If your family tree could quietly hand you a risk factor you never asked for, wouldn't you rather know calmly than find out by surprise? Now, in the next block, we'll bring this to a climax with 3 fast, real-world scenarios, exactly the ones people message about. LDL looks fine, but ApoB is high. LDL looks high, but ApoB isn't as high as expected. LDL looks fine, but LPA is high, the genetic twist. And I'll give you 2 things you can literally copy and paste into a clinician visit, a hidden risk checklist and a calm conversation script that doesn't make you sound like you got your medical degree from the internet. Let's hit the climax. 3 real-world scenarios, fast, familiar, and more common than people think. Scenario number 1. LDL looks fine, but ApoB is high. This is the classic cargo versus trucks mismatch.
Your LDL-C number looks reassuring, but ApoB suggests you're carrying more atherogenic particles than expected. Translation: more trucks are making more trips past your artery walls. That can mean more opportunity for particles to get retained over time, especially if other risk factors are present. The action here isn't panic, it's precision. This is where a clinician may talk about tightening LDL lowering, improving insulin sensitivity, addressing triglycerides, and looking at your total risk profile, not just the LDL headline. Scenario number 2. LDL is high, but ApoB isn't as high as expected. This one confuses people because the LDL headline looks loud, but the truck count isn't screaming. It doesn't mean LDL doesn't matter, it means context matters. Some people carry fewer particles with more cholesterol per particle. The LDL-C can look elevated, but ApoB suggests particle burden may be lower than the LDL number implies. A clinician may weigh this differently depending on age, blood pressure, diabetes status, smoking history, imaging, and family history. Sometimes it changes the intensity of the conversation, sometimes it doesn't, but it often improves the quality of the decision. Scenario number 3. LDL looks fine, and then LPA is high. This is the genetic twist. You didn't cause LPA. For many people, it's largely inherited and relatively stable. So the point of knowing it isn't to obsess over a number, it's to reframe your strategy. If LPA is elevated, your clinician may treat your overall prevention plan more proactively because your baseline risk is a bit more loaded, even when LDL looks okay. Now the calm action I promised. A hidden risk checklist. Who should consider discussing ApoB and/or LPA with a clinician? You don't need all of these. 1 or 2 can be enough to justify a thoughtful conversation. Family history of heart attack or stroke at younger ages, especially before around 60, or relatives with unexpected heart disease. You've had concerning findings, coronary calcium or plaque on imaging that feel out of proportion to your standard panel. Triglycerides tend to run high, HDL tends to run low, or you've been told pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, fatty liver, or metabolic syndrome. Your LDL-C is fine, but you have multiple risk factors: blood pressure creeping up, sleep apnea, smoking history, chronic inflammatory conditions. You're already making lifestyle changes and want better feedback than looks okay. You're trying to decide, together with your clinician, how aggressive to be, and you want a more complete risk picture. Clinician conversation script, copy-paste friendly. Keep it simple and non-combative. Here are phrases that work. My LDL-C is in range, but I've been learning that LDL doesn't always reflect particle number. Would ApoB help clarify my risk? Given my family history and age, would it make sense to check LPA at least once? If LPA is elevated, how would that change what we do? Lifestyle, medication discussions, or monitoring? Can we look at my overall risk, blood pressure, A1C, triglycerides, and family history, so we're not making decisions from one number? Notice what that does. It invites collaboration. It signals you want clarity, not drama. What not to do, this is important. Don't panic and assume a single lab result means you're doomed.
Don't self-treat aggressively with supplements or extreme diets, chasing one metric. Don't number chase without context. Risk management is a system, not a scoreboard. And don't skip the basics because you found a fancy marker. Sleep, activity, blood pressure, and glucose control are still the heavy hitters. Now the required explicit disclaimer again, because it matters. I am not a doctor, and this video is for education only. It is not medical advice, and it is not a diagnosis. Decisions about testing and treatment should be made with your licensed clinician who can evaluate your full medical history and personal risk. Here's the reflective question to close this out. If fine results have been giving you relief, but also a quiet sense of doubt, what's the one question you've been avoiding asking your clinician? Because clarity beats fear. Better questions beat internet panic, and a calm plan beats emotional whiplash every time. So I'll leave you with 2 prompts for the comments because your patterns help other people feel less alone. Have you ever been told your cholesterol was fine, but you still felt unsure? Any family history of heart disease or stroke before age 60? And if you want more calm, practical breakdowns like this, focused on questions you can actually bring into a clinician visit, you'll find more of them here. And if you want the logical next step after today, the next video is either ApoB versus LDL, what to do with ApoB is high, or LPA, what actually changes risk.